I'm Sarah, and I need to tell you about the day my parents handed my sister the deed to our childhood home while simultaneously sliding a lease agreement across the kitchen table for me to sign for the basement apartment. At 28 years old, watching my younger sister Emma receive a 4-bedroom house worth $400,000 while I was expected to pay $800 monthly rent to live in the basement felt like a punch to the gut that knocked the wind out of me for months. But what happened next exposed a web of family manipulation so deep and calculated that it changed everything I thought I knew about love, fairness, and what family really means. If you've ever felt like the forgotten child in your family, if you've experienced that crushing realization that your worth was never measured the same way as your siblings, this story is going to resonate with every fiber of your being. Because what started as housing inequality became a journey of discovering my own strength and building boundaries that finally protected the person I was meant to become. Growing up in our small Ohio town, I always sensed something different about how my parents treated Emma and me, but I convinced myself it was just normal sibling dynamics. Emma, 3 years younger, seemed to effortlessly capture my parents' attention and approval in ways that felt natural and deserved. When she made the high school cheerleading team, my parents drove 4 hours round trip to every single game, bought professional photography packages, and threw her a celebration dinner at the nicest restaurant in town. When I made the honor roll 6 semesters in a row, my achievement was acknowledged with a brief congratulations during dinner conversation, before the focus shifted back to Emma's latest social triumph or academic milestone. The pattern became more pronounced during our college years. Emma chose to attend State University, 20 minutes from home, studying communications with a focus on event planning. My parents paid her full tuition, covered her sorority fees, bought her a reliable Honda Civic, and supplemented her spending money so she could focus on her studies without working. Meanwhile, I had my heart set on studying environmental engineering at a competitive program 3 states away. When I brought home the acceptance letter with a partial scholarship that still left $15,000 annually in expenses, my parents expressed concerns about the distance, the cost, and whether I was really ready for such a challenging academic environment. I worked 30 hours weekly at a campus bookstore throughout college, took out student loans, and graduated with $42,000 in debt, while Emma graduated debt-free with a degree that led to a part-time position at a local wedding planning company. The financial disparity felt justified through family conversations that emphasized how Emma had chosen a more practical path closer to home, while I had insisted on pursuing expensive dreams in faraway places. After graduation, I returned home temporarily while job hunting, and that's when the housing conversation first surfaced. Emma had been living in a cute downtown apartment that my parents helped her afford, but she wanted something bigger, as she planned her wedding to her longtime boyfriend, Jake. My parents owned our childhood home outright after paying off the mortgage years earlier, and they had been discussing downsizing to a smaller place now that both daughters were adults. The initial proposal seemed reasonable on the surface. Emma and Jake would take over the family house, which needed some updating but provided the space they wanted for starting their married life. I would move into the finished basement apartment, which had its own entrance, kitchenette, and bathroom, creating a win-win situation where everyone had housing security and my parents could transition to their retirement condo without worrying about selling the family property. But the details revealed the true nature of the arrangement. Emma would receive the house through a quitclaim deed, becoming the legal owner of property worth $400,000 with no financial obligation beyond property taxes and basic maintenance. I would sign a month-to-month lease agreement paying $800 monthly rent for approximately 600 square feet of basement living space with no equity building, no ownership stake, and no long-term security. When I questioned the fairness of this arrangement during a family meeting in March, my parents explained that Emma was getting married and needed stability for her future family, while I was single and more flexible in my living situation. They emphasized that $800 was below market rate for comparable apartments in our area, and I should appreciate the opportunity to live affordably while establishing my career. The basement apartment was presented as a temporary solution until I figured out my next steps, though no timeline was specified for this transition period. The justification continued with observations about our different personalities and life choices. Emma was described as someone who valued family closeness and traditional milestones, while I was characterized as more independent and adventurous. My parents suggested that homeownership might not align with my lifestyle since I had chosen to attend college far from home and might want the flexibility to move for career opportunities. These explanations felt logical enough that I questioned my own discomfort with the arrangement. I signed the lease in April, moved into the basement apartment in May, and watched Emma and Jake move into the upstairs bedrooms, living room, kitchen, and backyard that had been my childhood home. The transition felt surreal as I adjusted to hearing footsteps above my ceiling and asking permission to use the washer and dryer that were technically in Emma's house now, even though they were located in my basement apartment area. The financial reality became more complex as months passed. Emma and Jake struggled to manage the property taxes, heating bills, and maintenance costs for the larger house on their combined income from part-time event planning and Jake's retail management position. My $800 monthly rent payments often went directly toward covering these expenses, essentially subsidizing their homeownership while I built no equity or long-term security for myself. Meanwhile, I had landed a position with an environmental consulting firm that required extensive travel for site assessments and project management. The irony wasn't lost on me that my parents' assumption about my flexibility and independence had proven accurate, but not in the way they had anticipated. Instead of being grateful for temporary housing, I found myself paying rent for a space I rarely occupied while building expertise and professional relationships that were advancing my career faster than I had expected. The breaking point came in November when Emma announced she was pregnant, and the family dynamic shifted again. Suddenly, my basement apartment was positioned as potentially problematic for a growing family. Emma expressed concerns about noise from my late-night work calls affecting the baby's sleep schedule. Jake suggested that having a tenant in the basement might complicate their home insurance and property tax assessments. My parents began floating the idea that it might be time for me to find my own place, so Emma and Jake could have complete privacy and security as new parents. The conversation felt like an eviction notice disguised as family planning. After 7 months of paying rent that had essentially covered their home ownership expenses, I was being encouraged to leave so they could enjoy their gift property without any financial contribution from rental income. The basement apartment could be converted into a playroom or additional storage space for baby equipment, eliminating the monthly rental income but providing more value to Emma's growing family. But what they didn't know was that my career had taken a significant leap during those months of travel and project work. The environmental consulting firm had offered me a senior position with a substantial salary increase, and I had been contacted by headhunters about opportunities with larger firms in major cities. I had also been building a freelance consulting practice that was generating additional income from weekend projects and evening work that I completed in my basement apartment office space. The family meeting in December, where they formally asked me to move out by February, became the moment when everything crystallized with perfect clarity. My parents sat around the same kitchen table where we had signed the lease agreement 8 months earlier, explaining that Emma needed space for her expanding family and that my rental arrangement had always been intended as temporary assistance while I established my independence. I listened to their rehearsed explanations about family priorities and Emma's needs as an expectant mother, and then I shared some information that shifted the entire conversation. I had been pre-approved for a mortgage that would allow me to purchase a 3-bedroom house in the desirable part of town where young professionals were investing in property. My income had increased by 60% since moving into the basement apartment, and my credit score reflected years of responsible financial management despite my student loan obligations. Furthermore, I had received an offer from a consulting firm in Portland that included relocation assistance, a signing bonus, and a salary that would double my current income within 2 years. I had been keeping these developments private while I evaluated my options, but their request for me to vacate had helped clarify which direction would best serve my long-term interests. The silence in the kitchen stretched uncomfortably as my parents processed this information. Emma's face reflected confusion about how I had achieved this level of financial success while living in their basement and paying rent that had supported their household expenses. Jake appeared uncomfortable as he realized that my departure would eliminate the rental income that had been covering their property tax and utility costs. My mother's first response was to question why I hadn't shared these career developments with the family earlier. She suggested that keeping such important information private indicated a lack of trust in family relationships and showed that I had been planning to abandon the family arrangement without consideration for Emma's needs. The criticism felt familiar and predictable, focusing on my perceived selfishness rather than acknowledging the inequality that had defined our housing arrangement. My father took a different approach, suddenly emphasizing that families should support each other and that my success should be shared for everyone's benefit. He suggested that I could afford to pay higher rent that would better support Emma and Jake's household expenses, or that I could contribute to home improvements that would increase the property value for Emma's benefit. The assumption that my financial progress should automatically translate into greater financial support for Emma's household revealed the underlying expectation that had shaped our entire relationship dynamic. But the most devastating moment came when Emma finally spoke and revealed what had been discussed during family conversations that excluded me. She told me that she and Jake had been planning to convert the basement apartment into a rental unit for additional income once I moved out, but they had hoped I would continue paying rent through the winter months to help them financially prepare for the baby's arrival and cover the renovation costs for the basement conversion. The calculated nature of their planning became crystal clear. My eviction request wasn't about noise concerns or privacy needs for their growing family. It was about timing my departure to coincide with their financial preparation for renovating the basement into a more profitable rental unit that could command higher monthly rent from future tenants who wouldn't have family connections or expectations of below-market pricing. I had been paying rent that subsidized their homeownership, while they planned to eventually replace me with tenants who would pay more money for the same space. My family had been treating me as a temporary financial bridge to help Emma and Jake establish their home ownership and prepare for profitability, rather than offering genuine housing assistance or family support. The realization that my parents had gifted Emma a $400,000 property while positioning me as a rent-paying tenant who could be replaced when financially convenient felt like the final piece of a puzzle that revealed the true nature of our family relationships. I wasn't the daughter receiving support during a career transition. I was the income source helping to subsidize my sister's gift while building no equity or security for my own future. That night in my basement apartment, I made phone calls that changed the trajectory of everything. I accepted the Portland position with its relocation package and signing bonus. I contacted a real estate agent about purchasing property as an investment opportunity before relocating. I researched property management companies that could handle rental income from investment properties while I lived and worked in other cities. But most importantly, I scheduled a meeting with a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and boundary setting, because I recognized that my pattern of accepting unequal treatment and questioning my own perceptions needed professional support to break permanently. The conversation with Dr. Martinez during my first therapy session in January validated observations I had been making for years, but had learned to suppress or rationalize. She helped me identify the systematic pattern of financial and emotional favoritism that had characterized my parents' relationship with Emma versus their relationship with me. The housing arrangement wasn't an isolated incident of unequal treatment. It was the most recent and transparent example of a family dynamic that had trained me to accept less while providing more. Dr. Martinez introduced concepts about family scapegoating, golden child dynamics, and financial manipulation that gave me language for understanding my experiences. She helped me recognize that my parents' justifications for the housing inequality weren't reasonable accommodations for different personalities and circumstances. They were rationalization strategies that maintained an unfair system while making me responsible for accepting and adapting to that unfairness. Through our sessions, I developed clarity about the difference between family loyalty and family exploitation. Supporting each other during difficult times was healthy and normal. Expecting one family member to subsidize another family member's financial advantage while sacrificing their own security and equity building was manipulation disguised as family cooperation. The most powerful insight came when Dr. Martinez asked me to imagine how my parents would respond if Emma had been asked to pay rent for basement living while I received a free house. The exercise revealed that the arrangement would have been unthinkable with the roles reversed, which confirmed that the inequality wasn't based on fair assessment of our different circumstances and personalities. It was based on established patterns of favoritism that had been normalized through years of practice and justification. Armed with this therapeutic support and professional validation, I scheduled a final family meeting for early February where I would communicate my decisions and establish clear boundaries for future relationships. I approached this conversation not with anger or revenge motivation, but with the calm clarity that comes from professional guidance and self-advocacy training. I began by thanking my parents for allowing me to live in the basement apartment during a transition period that had been more valuable than they realized. The 8 months of below-market rent had enabled me to save money while building my career, and I was grateful for that opportunity. However, I had come to understand that our housing arrangement represented a pattern of unequal treatment that wasn't healthy for family relationships or my personal development. I explained my decision to relocate to Portland for career advancement, and I offered to continue paying rent through March to give them time to find new tenants for the basement apartment. I would not be contributing to renovation costs for converting the space, since I would not benefit from improvements that increased rental income for Emma and Jake's household. Most importantly, I shared my commitment to building family relationships based on mutual respect and equal consideration, rather than accepting arrangements that consistently benefited one family member at another family member's expense. This meant that future financial discussions would need to acknowledge the $400,000 gift disparity and address how family support could be balanced more equitably. The response was immediate and predictable. My mother accused me of being jealous of Emma's stability and marriage, suggesting that my relocating across the country proved that I was running away from family responsibilities rather than building healthy relationships. My father focused on the inconvenience of finding new tenants and losing rental income, emphasizing that family members should prioritize each other's needs over individual career ambitions. Emma's reaction was perhaps the most revealing. She expressed hurt that I was choosing to leave during her pregnancy when she needed family support the most. She suggested that my therapy was filling my head with ideas about problems that didn't really exist, and that I was creating family conflict over housing arrangements that had been fair and beneficial for everyone involved. But Jake's response exposed the true foundation of their family planning. He immediately began calculating how much additional rent they could charge for the basement apartment once I moved out, and whether they could find tenants willing to sign longer lease terms that would provide more financial security for their household budget. His focus on replacing my rental income revealed that my family value had been primarily financial rather than emotional or relational. I listened to their responses with the calm strength that comes from therapeutic preparation and clear personal boundaries. I acknowledged their disappointment while maintaining my commitment to career advancement and healthier family dynamics. I offered to help them transition by providing referrals for potential tenants and maintaining rent payments through March as originally discussed. But I also communicated clearly that future family relationships would need to be based on equal respect and consideration, rather than expecting me to accept consistently disadvantageous arrangements while questioning my own perceptions of fairness. I would not be available for financial exploitation disguised as family cooperation, regardless of the circumstances or justifications provided. The most empowering moment came when my father suggested that my attitude was ungrateful and selfish, given everything the family had done to support me. I was able to respond with specific examples of the support disparity between Emma's experience and my experience, including the $42,000 in student loans I had taken while Emma graduated debt-free, the gift house worth $400,000 that Emma received while I paid rent for basement living, and the consistent pattern of my contributions supporting Emma's advantages while receiving explanations about why equal treatment wasn't appropriate for my circumstances. The conversation ended with my parents expressing hope that I would reconsider my decisions after having time to think about the impact on family relationships. Emma suggested that distance might help us all gain perspective and rebuild stronger connections in the future. Jake remained focused on practical concerns about finding replacement tenants and maintaining rental income for their household budget. But I left that meeting with unprecedented clarity about my worth, my boundaries, and my commitment to building relationships based on mutual respect rather than accepting manipulation justified as family loyalty. Dr. Martinez had prepared me for the likelihood that establishing boundaries would be met with resistance and attempts to maintain familiar patterns of inequality. The transition to Portland exceeded every expectation I had for career advancement and personal fulfillment. The consulting firm provided challenges that utilized my environmental engineering expertise while expanding my project management and client relations skills. The relocating to a city with extensive hiking trails, farmers markets, and environmental advocacy organizations aligned perfectly with my personal interests and values. Most surprisingly, the financial success that followed proved to my family that their assumptions about my capabilities and potential had been dramatically underestimated. Within 6 months of relocating, I had been promoted to lead project manager with responsibility for major client accounts. Within a year, I had been offered partnership track with equity participation in firm profits. The investment property I had purchased in Ohio before relocating appreciated faster than projected due to downtown revitalization efforts, and the rental income exceeded my original projections. I was building wealth through property ownership while living in a Portland apartment that provided the flexibility I wanted for exploring career opportunities and personal relationships without long-term housing commitments. But the most validating development came when my expertise was recognized through industry awards and speaking opportunities at national conferences. The environmental consulting work that my family had questioned as impractical career choice became the foundation for professional recognition that opened doors to consulting opportunities, board positions, and speaking engagements that generated significant additional income. During this period of career expansion, my family's communication focused primarily on updates about Emma's pregnancy, Jake's job changes, and their ongoing challenges with homeownership expenses. The basement apartment had been successfully rented to graduate students who paid $1,200 monthly, which was 50% more than my rent had been, confirming the calculated nature of their rental expectations for family versus non-family tenants. The ultimate validation came when my parents contacted me in December, almost a year after I had moved to Portland, with a request that revealed how dramatically our circumstances had shifted. Emma's pregnancy had resulted in unexpected medical complications that required extended bed rest and reduced her ability to work. Jake had been laid off from his retail management position and was struggling to find comparable employment. The increased rental income from the basement apartment wasn't sufficient to cover their household expenses during this financial crisis. My parents wanted to know if I could provide financial assistance for Emma's household during this difficult period, suggesting that my career success created family obligations to help during emergencies. They emphasized Emma's vulnerable condition as a new mother facing financial stress, and they reminded me that family members should support each other during challenging times. The request felt like an opportunity to demonstrate the healthy boundaries I had been developing through continued therapy sessions with Dr. Martinez. I responded with empathy for Emma's medical challenges and Jake's employment difficulties while maintaining clear limits about financial responsibility and family obligations. I offered to provide specific assistance that aligned with my values and boundaries. I would contribute $500 toward medical expenses that weren't covered by insurance, because healthcare emergencies were circumstances where family support was appropriate and meaningful. However, I would not provide ongoing financial support for their household expenses, mortgage payments, or lifestyle maintenance, because those were responsibilities that came with homeownership and adult financial planning. Most importantly, I explained that my financial assistance was based on genuine care for Emma's well-being during medical challenges, not because of family obligations or expectations created by my career success. Future financial assistance would depend on specific circumstances and my capacity to help, rather than assumptions about family duties or wealth redistribution expectations. The response revealed how much my boundary setting had disrupted familiar family dynamics. My parents expressed disappointment that I wasn't more generous with family members who needed help, especially when my income could easily cover their requests. Emma suggested that my conditions and limitations showed that success had changed me in ways that prioritized money over family relationships. But Jake's response was surprisingly honest and reflective. He acknowledged that the housing arrangement had been unfair from the beginning, and that they had benefited financially from my rental payments while building equity in property that Emma had received as a gift. He expressed gratitude for my willingness to contribute toward medical expenses while respecting my boundaries about ongoing financial support. His acknowledgement felt like the first genuine recognition of the inequality that had characterized our family's financial dynamics. It wasn't an apology or an offer to make amends, but it was an honest admission that their advantages had been supported by my contributions in ways that weren't equitable or sustainable. Through continued therapy sessions, I processed the complex emotions that came with watching my family face financial difficulties while maintaining boundaries that protected my own financial security and emotional well-being. Dr. Martinez helped me understand that empathy and boundary setting weren't contradictory responses. I could care about Emma's medical challenges while refusing to enable financial dependency or accept responsibility for problems that resulted from their advantages and choices. The most profound growth came from recognizing that my family's financial crisis revealed the difference between temporary assistance and systematic enabling. Contributing toward medical expenses was appropriate support during genuine emergencies. Providing ongoing financial support for household expenses would recreate the pattern where my resources subsidized Emma's advantages while compromising my own financial security and independence. As Emma recovered from her medical complications and Jake found new employment, their financial stress decreased and family communication returned to sharing updates about daily life and future plans. But the dynamics had shifted permanently because my boundaries had established new expectations about financial responsibility and family obligations. The housing inequality that had prompted my original questioning of family dynamics became a catalyst for recognizing and addressing systematic patterns that extended far beyond real estate decisions. The basement apartment lease had been the most transparent example of unequal treatment, but therapy had helped me identify how those patterns had shaped educational support, career encouragement, financial assistance, and emotional validation throughout our family relationships. More than 2 years after relocating to Portland, I maintain family relationships that are based on mutual respect rather than accepting disadvantageous arrangements justified as family loyalty. I communicate regularly with Emma about her experiences as a new mother and offer emotional support during challenging periods. I maintain cordial relationships with my parents while enforcing boundaries that prevent financial manipulation or exploitation. The most important transformation has been developing self-advocacy skills that protect my interests while maintaining compassion for family members who are facing difficulties. I can care about Emma's well-being without accepting responsibility for solving problems that result from advantages she received and choices she made. I can appreciate my parents' desire to help their children without accepting unequal treatment justified as accommodation for different personalities and circumstances. Looking back, the basement apartment lease was the most valuable learning experience I've ever invested in, though not for the reasons my family intended. $800 monthly rent for 8 months taught me that accepting unfair arrangements gradually erodes self-worth and enables family manipulation that becomes increasingly difficult to recognize and address. The financial disparity between Emma's gift house and my rental payments revealed systematic favoritism that had been normalized through years of justifications and explanations that trained me to question my own perceptions rather than advocate for equal treatment. The therapeutic support and professional validation I received during that period transformed my understanding of healthy family relationships and appropriate personal boundaries. Most importantly, the experience taught me that family love doesn't require accepting inequality, and that setting boundaries actually creates space for healthier relationships based on mutual respect, rather than enabling dysfunction that damages everyone involved. If you're watching this because you recognize patterns of favoritism or financial manipulation in your own family relationships, I want you to know that questioning these dynamics isn't selfish or ungrateful. Family members who consistently benefit from unequal arrangements have strong motivations to maintain those systems, and they will often use guilt, obligation, and family loyalty to discourage the kind of questioning that leads to positive change. Professional support through therapy, counseling, or family therapy can provide the validation and boundary-setting skills that make it possible to advocate for yourself while maintaining family relationships that align with your values and well-being. You deserve family relationships based on equal consideration and mutual respect, regardless of your age, marital status, career choices, or financial circumstances. Financial manipulation and systematic favoritism within families cause lasting damage that extends far beyond money and housing arrangements. These patterns shape self-worth, relationship expectations, and life choices in ways that can limit potential and happiness for decades if they aren't recognized and addressed with appropriate support and boundary setting. Your worth isn't determined by family members who have benefited from unequal treatment, and your success doesn't create obligations to subsidize advantages that others have received at your expense. Building healthy boundaries and advocating for equal consideration requires courage and persistence, but it creates space for authentic relationships that honor your value and potential. What stories do you have about family favoritism or financial inequality that shaped your understanding of relationships and self-worth? How have you navigated the complex balance between family loyalty and personal boundaries when dealing with systematic unfairness or manipulation? Share your experiences in the comments below, because your story might provide exactly the validation and encouragement that someone else needs to recognize their own worth and develop the boundaries that create space for healthier relationships. And if this video helped you process your own family dynamics or inspired you to seek professional support for boundary setting, please subscribe and share it with others who might benefit from hearing that they aren't alone in these struggles and that change is possible with the right support and commitment to personal growth.